These 6 eggs were laid by a single female hingeback tortoise in 2 separate clutches. They were laid on September 22nd and October 26, 2023. If they hatch, they'll be true Bell's hingeback tortoises, Kinixys belliana. However, these are not the Bell's hingeback tortoises many are familiar with from decades past. That would be Western hingeback, Kinixys nogueyi. Likewise, these are neither Speke's hingebacks, Kinixys speke, nor the Eastern hingeback, Kinixys zombensis. All 4 of these species are unique and represented in captivity in different numbers. Further, these are some of the first Bell's hingeback eggs laid in the United States, at least in the 21st century. As good as this may seem, establishing the species has been awful. Since 2020 and 2021, the vast majority of the imported Bell's hingebacks have died in the months after importation or survive around 2 years before perishing with failed treatments. Typically, only random individuals or pairs do well here and there around the country. I'm Aaron Johnson. I've been keeping Bell's hingebacks since January 2022, and I am fortunate enough to be incubating these eggs. I'm also expecting an additional clutch from another female. For these reasons, I'm presenting breakthroughs or advancements in keeping the true Bell's hingeback. These breakthroughs are 1. The husbandry and nutrition necessary to keep the Bell's hingeback thriving. 2. Diagnosing and treating a subset of them for the disease that has evidently killed most of them in the United States, Testudine Intranuclear Coccidiosis, or for short, TINC, T-I-N-C. And 3. Breeding them in captivity and working on the science of incubating their eggs. Keeping the Bell's hingebacks is straightforward when they're healthy. I plan to raise baby Bells the same way as I raise baby Speke's hingebacks. Raising babies through to young adulthood in semi or fully closed chambers will ensure smooth, natural growth. An ambient temperature of 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, no hotter than 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and 80 to 100% relative humidity will do the trick. I do not recommend heat bulbs or ceramic heat emitters except to prevent temperatures from dipping too low. The 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit range is easiest to achieve in a room that is already warm. But if a secondary heating source is necessary to use, make sure to use the lowest wattage required to get ideal temperatures. Simply using UV fluorescence in conjunction with a white LED plant light might be all you need. Tops of tubs can be cut out carefully and marked so that any heating or lighting can be carefully set on top of the terrarium lid. If young animals bask for long periods of time under hot spotlights, they are very likely to have less than ideal shell development and will become bumpy. These hingebacks need to grow smooth without pyramiding. Spraying the walls of the terrarium with water is all you need to do in this general setup to maintain the 80% and higher relative humidity. In an open-top terrarium, young adults and older enjoy an ambient temperature range of 70 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit with a basking area of 90 degrees. The relative humidity should be high, ideally 80%, and higher for microclimates. I usually achieve microclimates with plants like a nice Boston fern that provides cover and moisture. Maintaining humidity is always a work in progress, with heat lamps in an open enclosure and particularly if you live in colder climates. In this case, watering down the soil and mulch daily to every other day, adjusting as necessary, can improve this. Misters and foggers are also options. Maintaining relatively fresh water in bowls or plant saucers also needs to be provided. I give them living, non-toxic plants in both baby and adult hingeback tortoise terrariums. I use natural white LED plant lighting for them. For the hingebacks themselves, I use T5 UV lighting between 5.0 and 10.0 rating. A wide variety of food of high fiber and protein, along with calcium and vitamin D3, establishes what they need nutritionally. The hingebacks are omnivores, and my Bells, Spekes, and Holmes hingebacks all gobble down red wigglers and night crawlers. Offer them at least once a week. Their standard meals consist of greens, edible weeds, mushrooms, squash, mixed vegetables, high-fiber tortoise chows, and commercial foods often designed for box turtles, blue-tongued skinks, and bearded dragons. They also appreciate red and orange foods like red and orange bell peppers. They also love bananas. Now we move to the disease that has killed so many Kinixys belliana in captivity, Testudine Intranuclear Coccidiosis, which I'll shorten to TINC. This disease can infect any turtle or tortoise species and is extremely lethal and contagious. It spreads by the oral fecal route, in which a tortoise consumes poop with parasites inside it. At this point in transmission, the parasite is in the form of an oocyst, which you can think of as an egg. It's extremely resistant to chemicals and is likely able to persist in the environment for a year or longer. Food and water contaminated with feces, as well as the environment, can infect your entire colony of tortoises. We're not simply dealing with coccidiosis of the gut. TINC can infect any organ with epithelium. That includes the intestines, liver, pancreas, kidneys, nose, respiratory tract, lungs, eyes, ears, mouth, thymus, endocrine glands, urogenital tract, and the cloaca. It infects the actual nuclei of epithelial cells. Hence, TINC is an intranuclear, multisystemic disease of escalating severity. In other words, if a tortoise is symptomatic for TINC, they're most likely screwed without aggressive treatment. Symptoms unfortunately can be the same as with other diseases and delay diagnosis. They have intermittent appetite and eventually lose it altogether. They may just stare at the food and finally just turn around to sleep in the corner. They're lethargic and they stop thermoregulating their bodies. They have diarrhea. The sick bells would often just soak themselves for hours upon hours, but not actually drink, and become dehydrated. Some developed nasal discharge, and all had eye discharge with one or both eyes sealing. One tortoise developed stomatitis, otherwise known as mouth rot, with tan to yellow colored plaques and severe inflammation, followed by tissue turning necrotic. So how do we diagnose TINC, and what can we do about it? I had 2 Bell's Hingebacks die before getting a diagnosis, with the female dying first at the beginning of April 2022, followed by the male at the end of May 2022, who had stomatitis, a respiratory infection, anorexia, and so on. I bagged and refrigerated his body and sent it to the University of Florida for a necropsy, followed by PCR tests. Both the necropsy and the quantitative PCR showed evidence of TINC. He was negative for herpes virus, and the histological results didn't warrant testing for ranavirus. After this, I knew it was very plausible that most of the Kinixys belliana dying around the country was likely also due to TINC, but with false negatives. Testing for TINC without necropsy requires swabbing the cloaca and/or the oral cavity and the choana, and then the sample is tested via quantitative PCR. qPCR is extremely accurate, but the parasite must be present at the sample site. If it's not, or if it is missed, the parasite could be somewhere else in the animal's body, such as the pancreas, and you still end up with a negative, although false. Regardless, how do you treat TINC? A tortoise has the best chance of survival if treatment begins before it stops eating. Ponazaril currently is the best known drug against TINC. Veterinarians Pete Koplis and Evan Rozanoff have had relative success in various species with the following rigorous treatment and protocol. Ponazaril 100 mg per kilogram, a minimum of 3 to 6 months, orally every 48 hours. After 90 days, test through qPCR. 3 negative tests are necessary, usually at 60-day intervals, in order to finish a treatment. You may also require other antiparasitic medications such as Panacur and Flagyl, and you may also require some antibiotics such as ceftazidime or Fortaz, danofloxacin or Advocin, or tulathromycin or Draxin. The goal is then to avoid sepsis and to allow the animal's body to recover. I have given ponazaril to 5 Bell's Hingebacks. 3 of those Hingebacks were from the same group as the 2 that died. 2 others were purchased separately. The first female, named Zawadi, died shortly after treatment started. A second female, named Katanji, seemingly began to recover after being treated with ceftazidime in conjunction with ponazaril, but despite eating regularly, she died suddenly about a month or so later. I suspect organ failure. The final bell from this group of 5 was a male named Socorro, and he was given 7 months of ponazaril from the beginning of August 2022 till the end of February 2023. When treatment began, his urine was green and slimy. Several months after treatment, his urine turned clear and yellow. He gained over 100 grams and had been doing exceptionally well at one point. Because his TINC symptoms had resolved, I took him off ponazaril by March 2023. But he began to lose weight, and an eye infection would not respond to antibiotics. I took him to my reptile veterinarian, and we decided to continue his treatment for TINC, and we also found flagellated parasites in his urine, which were causing mucus. We treated him with metronidazole, and soon he began to excrete globs of brown-tinted mucus and nematode worms. I had never seen these worms in the year before giving him metronidazole. That would have meant treating him additionally with fenbendazole in order to destroy the nematodes. However, poor Socorro died and was the last of the original group of 5. The other group of 2 is still in treatment. They are stable, although the male has green urine. I plan to check his liver function through blood work to see if he has liver failure. If all checks out fine, I'll pursue qPCR for TINC to see if he tests positive. He and his mate have taken ponazaril for over a year now. 2 other pairs, plus a single female, are doing phenomenally well and have never had TINC symptoms. Despite this, I plan to keep them indefinitely quarantined until further details of the TINC life cycle are known, such as whether the parasite can take a dormant form called a bradyzoite that is resilient to ponazaril. We still don't know if TINC can be fully cured or if the animals remain infected indefinitely. There are 2 other points I want to make regarding TINC. The first is that every keeper needs to know that there is no true safe length of time for quarantine of any turtle and tortoise. Cryptic diseases such as TINC that can hide in the body and appear long after a year of quarantine have the capability of destroying every one of your animals, and it can cost hundreds and thousands of dollars in vet bills. This is why we need biosecurity and to glove up between species and our various colonies. Don't just introduce an animal to a long-established group. Establish a second or a third group and ensure best practices in biosecurity and husbandry. The second point to make is that although it is appealing to believe that husbandry such as ideal temperature and humidity levels can solve TINC, if the parasite is present, it can become symptomatic at any time, just like any disease that is in remission. Plenty of people have kept species, from leopard tortoises to Galapagos tortoises, outdoors or in excellent conditions, and TINC still kills their animals without treatment once symptomatic. And then it also is possible for sudden death with no symptoms at all. When dealing with TINC, glove up, make everything disposable as possible, isolate and treat every suspected animal, clean and scrub. Keep working hard. Euthanasia is also always an option, and remember to protect your healthy colonies most of all. Now for the third part, breeding Kinixys belliana in captivity. I have 2 unrelated pairs housed separately. The first pair, which laid eggs in September and October of 2023, I've had since April 2022. I'm the 3rd keeper of them. The second pair has been in my care since March 2023, and I'm also the 3rd keeper of them. Keeping them indoors in Missouri, I see breeding begin around April, which is also when my home's Hingebacks begin to breed as well. In August, I noticed slight changes in behavior in the female who laid eggs on September 22nd, 2023. Overall, she was a bit less spry than in the months before and reduced her food intake just a bit. Then, about 2 weeks prior to laying, she began to eat considerably less and finally rejected worms. She was restless and paced around, and she inspected her environment. I decided to move the male since he was annoying her. About a day later, she dug her first hole. She would either leave the holes partially covered or cover them entirely. She will drink lots of water and urinate considerably when nesting. I added a lot of soil in the spot she had dig, which was always under the heat lamp and UV light. The heat lamp is crucial, since the other female always chooses to dig under it in her enclosure. Moreover, the female laid a clutch of 3 eggs between 4 to 6 inches deep in an extremely moist and tidy hole. She covered it remarkably well. I put the male back into her enclosure about a week later, and all was well. Then she began to pace and lose appetite towards the end of October. I removed the male, and she laid 3 more eggs in the same manner with only 1 hole dug this time. It was flawless. My other female has been digging off and on for about 3 weeks. Her appetite has not diminished compared to the other female, but she does soak herself and drink a lot. I added more soil to her enclosure and will continue to make improvements based on observations. Her mate has not been a bother, but I am separating him from her since that may be necessary for Bell's females to fully nest and lay their eggs. As for the eggs, I wash them with soap to reduce chances of any TINC parasite oocysts from remaining on the eggshell. I prepare an area and then wash off all soil in lukewarm water. I always make sure to hold the egg with at least 3 fingers to prevent egg rotation or dropping it. I keep it oriented in the way I found it. Once the soil is thoroughly removed, I use Dawn soap and lather the exposed egg for at least 20 seconds. I rinse. Then I use 3 fingers from my other hand to hold the cleaned areas and lather the other surfaces of the egg for 20 seconds and thoroughly rinse. Thoroughly lathering for more than 20 seconds and then rinsing is an effective way to remove microbes from surfaces. As for incubating the eggs, I incubate them in vermiculite with an Aphanelus Husbandry branded incubator. I am keeping the relative humidity between 70 and 80%. I also sprinkle or spritz water from water containers within the Husbandry or with a small spray bottle directly onto the eggs twice a week. This is called the isothermal method of applying water and works remarkably well for choco tortoises, which require dry substrate during incubation. For belliana, it may work just fine to use a 50-50 water to vermiculite by weight method, but I am doing it the other way for now. Eggs begin to band and chalk within days or weeks once incubation begins. I have not had any egg development since September or October by incubating the eggs at 80 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. I spoke with a successful breeder in Europe and now will incubate the eggs at around 88 to 88.5 degrees Fahrenheit for females and around 86 degrees Fahrenheit for males. I'll maintain humidity between 70 and 80%. Likely, Bell's Hingeback eggs will hatch between 3 and 7 months. Thank you to everyone who sat in to watch the entire presentation of breakthroughs in keeping the true Bell's Hingeback tortoise. To close, I wanted to share some great comparison and contrast photos of the Western Hingeback and 3 different species of Hingebacks direct from Kenya: the Speke Hingeback, the Eastern or zombensis Hingeback, and the true Bell's Hingeback, photographed and provided by Jeremy Thompson and Rachel Griffith. The first contrast is between a Western Hingeback, Kinixys nogueyi, which is very light and caramel colored, and a Kinixys belliana that has a black shell with radiating patterns. If you could see the belliana's head, you'd see that the coloration is completely solid and dark, whereas the noguei's head is not. The nogueyi has 4 digits on its forelimbs, and the belliana has 5 digits on its forelimbs. The second photo contrasts a Kenyan Kinixys Speke, which has lighter coloration around the skull and a dark center. Their heads are bicolored. Again, the Kenyan Kinixys belliana has a solid colored head. The Speke's carapace is also much flatter than the domed shell of the belliana. Speke also have 5 digits on their forelimbs. The third photo contrasts a true Bell's hingeback from Kenya with a Kenyan eastern hingeback, Kinixys zombensis. Pay attention to the heads. The belliana's solid head is in great contrast to the bicolored zombensis head, showing light yellow around the skull and a dark center. In the fourth photo, you can see the flattened carapace of the zombensis and the domed carapace of the belliana. Zombensis also has 5 digits on their forelimbs. Finally, a contrast from the top, from left to right, of zombensis, Speke, and belliana. Both zombensis and Speke have blockier heads than belliana, whose face tapers. Alright, that's all. Take care and keep turtling.